KABC time, 24 minutes past 11 on Open Mind. I'm Bill Jenkins. Ho is with me, and also with me is Catherine. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Bill. I'd like to find out where I could get some of those quartz crystals. I've looked all over for them.
They're everywhere.
They're not everywhere, but they're starting to be everywhere. You can get quartz crystals in most of the New Age bookstores now, the metaphysical bookstores. But we do have crystals on sale, and like I said, we tried to get all the crystal people together, all our dealers together to help us out with this, and they have brought in some amazing things. So we'll have plenty of jewelry, plenty of necklaces, plenty of pendants. We're going to have points and clusters, eggs and balls, and some very unusual pieces, including this 200-pound, it's a 200-pound clear quartz cluster, which is a little much to wear, perhaps, but it's nice to look at. Put on a coffee table, giant geodes.
I wouldn't wear. Lapidary stores usually have quartz
They usually
crystals.
have quite a bit of that, too. Yeah, you can get it from there.
Where's that?
Lapidary stores, rock shops.
Oh.
They hate it when you call them rock shops.
My big problem is I'm blind, and it's so hard for me to get around. I'd love to attend one of your sessions, but I just can't get around.
So in that case, if you call the number that we gave you, and I'll give that again in a second, we can arrange to send you crystals if you need them, and of course the tapes as well. It's a perfect way to put on a tape. And these are 90-minute tapes. They're not 60-minute tapes. They're 90-minute lectures which have been edited down to try and give out the most important information.
Is that a type of tape I can put on my stereo?
Absolutely.
Good.
And we have 3 of them now, and there'll be more in the next couple of months, so...
Well, then, will you give me that number again? I've got to write it down and figure it out.
Sure. It's the number for Heidi Ho Enterprises, and that number is 818...
818...
761...
761...
0945.
0945.
And the people there can also tell you all about the tour. And like I said, we'll also, I know you can't come to this, Catherine, but we will also have the photographs of the crystal skull, so people can take some time and look at them and see what's there, and free lectures. So it's going to be quite a big get-together on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday.
Oh, I'd love to see it, but I just have no way of getting it.
Well, that's why we tried to figure out a system to get to you, and we thought the cassette tapes were the best way.
Oh, that'll be fine. Then I'll call this number tomorrow.
Okay, Catherine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.
And if we can, for Bessie, we spell chrysoprase, CHRYSOPRASE.
Right now, Bessie, I hope you've got that. Ruth, you're on.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
I took a session, 2-day session with Ho a couple years ago, a year and a half ago, and been convinced that crystals are one of the best things that walked into my life. And I particularly want to say thank you for the light invocation, one of the most useful tools I've been given in years. I'd recommend everybody write it down, and particularly in stress moments, use it because it works.
Can you repeat it to me again?
Certainly.
Go
I
ahead.
invoke the light of the Christ within. I am a clear and perfect channel. Light is my guide.
And it works for you, huh?
You bet. The reason I'm calling, I'd like to throw 3 things out and then listen to what Ho has to say. First of all, I made a present of a double-terminated quartz crystal to my mother, a real unbeliever, recently. But on a whim, she decided to use it, and she's a researcher. And she was holding her crystal and noticed an interesting phenomena, which was flashes of intuitive inspiration. She'd been using sleeping pills to sleep for quite a while, and thought, well, why not? Let's give it a shot. So she took it to bed with her one night, held it in her left hand, and she says had one of the best night's sleep she'd ever had in her life. However, that crystal has disappeared, and it hasn't fallen into bed covers or anywhere else, and I was curious if there's been any cases of dematerialization.
Oh, boy.
That's the first thing. Second
Okay,
thing...
can we take these one at a time? Because if we get a whole list of them, the listeners and I forget the questions.
Okay.
Let's take them one at a time.
All right.
2 things on that. Yes, there are cases of that. Let's start with materialization, because it's, for some reason, it's easier for most people to believe that things appear than disappear.
Mm-hmm.
There are stories about shaman in Africa, who will tap their cheeks and crystals will fall out. And what happens is when they can no longer tap their cheeks or some part of their body and produce crystals, that's when they're thrown out of the group. Now, just so that we know it isn't just shaman in Africa, when I was in Palm Springs, I had a young lady, she's 7 years old, come up to my table, and I had crystals that were all approximately 1 inch to 1.5 inches long. And she started taking little tiny crystals that were like just petite little pieces out of this basket, and I knew there weren't any in there like that. So we dumped everything out on the table. We put the big crystals in one at a time so her mother could see what we were doing, and then after she took out another half a dozen little ones, I thought it was time to stop playing the game. But it isn't just shaman. There are people who are able to do that. Now, another aspect of this is that, as we talked in the beginning, crystals are living things. And anything that's alive, and understand why I say crystals are living things, folks. First of all, because they grow in the mineral kingdom. They grow very slowly, but they grow. Anything that grows is alive. And anything that we acknowledge as having life on this planet has water in it. And crystals are, quite frankly, in a way, they're fossilized water. So we know crystals grow. And crystals won't stay with anyone that they don't want to stay with. They disappear. Now, I know that there are going to be scientists out there who are going to want to take me over the coals on this and know exactly how they disappear. I don't know how they disappear. They just do. Now, Ruth, another thing I wanted to ask you before you ask your other two questions. Did you do the crystal healing workshop with us?
Yes.
All right. One of the things that I have discovered, because we teach a technique in there called the balancing of the brain hemispheres.
Right.
And one of the things I've discovered is that if you balance the brain hemispheres before you go to sleep, it cuts down on insomnia. What happens is that we go to bed after having put in a full day in the left brain mode, and our minds keep whirling while we try to go to sleep. So I sat there for an hour and watched the clock until I remembered I hadn't done that, balanced them, and within 3 minutes was sound asleep, and I've suggested it for other students, and it's worked.
Well, I'll suggest it to my mother then.
Please do. Now, you had two other quick questions?
Yeah. The issue of clearing and charging. I've been using the initial process of the 7-day salt clearing.
Mm-hmm.
I recently received literature from an institute involved also with crystals, which recommended not doing that. They sort of described it as a destructive process, and they suggested just water and soap with a mental intention.
All right, first of all, there is no damage to the crystal. Salt is crystal in its natural form. And crystals do not get hurt by salt. Crystals are the hardest substance we know after diamonds, and the salt won't hurt them. All it does is it slows down the energy field. But I grant you, 7 days is a long time to wait, and I think holding the crystal, doing the light invocation, or if you remember in the crystal healing workshop where we taught the technique with the meter,
right,
the visualization will do the job as well.
Okay.
And I find it's just as well, if not better. But salt was something, you see, in the beginning, Ruth, we started off with salt because it was something that most people couldn't do wrong. You follow?
Yes.
Okay. And question number 3.
Okay. I recently met a shaman, an American Indian shaman, who had been using crystals without... He wasn't in on what's happening with crystals and the explosion of information at the moment. And he described where in handing a crystal to an individual, it was perfectly clear to start with. It then clouded up in the presence of the other individual. When it was given back to him, it completely cleared again, which was an indication of some negativity there. In terms of negativity or perhaps changes that crystals can undergo, one thing I'm a little concerned about right now is the amount of information that is out there available to people about the uses of crystals, which I believe is a technology and not a mystical science, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a little concern about the misuse of what can be done, for example, with power and energy rods and things like that are becoming extremely popular.
I understand what you're saying. I'm not going to go into different books and different authors and people tonight, Ruth, but there are some books out there which are definitely very, very aggressive in the way they use crystals. And I don't believe in that. I'm just interested in the changes that I can create within myself and the people around me that are balancing changes. I certainly would say that through the study I have realized that there are a lot of potentially negative techniques that people can learn, and I can only hope that people keep away from them on their own. That's an individual thing. There is certainly a belief that Atlantis was destroyed because of a misuse of their power, and crystals were part of it. For those people who believe in Atlantis, that's a very valuable possibility. It's a very valid possibility. All I can say is there's a lot of misinformation out on crystals because it's a new field. It's a relatively new field. Most people are writing the same material over, and we have two strange things happening. One is we have a lot of people writing books because they've either read a book or taken a class and figure, I can rephrase that and put a book out. The other are people who channel information. Now, I am very much impressed with many channels. I've worked with mediums quite a bit. But the thing is that these people will channel information and write a book and never try the technique to see if it works. And that, I think, is a great injustice to the public who want technique. That's why I've put out the cassettes, which are crystal techniques. That's why I'm working on my book, which will be an encyclopedia of techniques. And this gives me a great opportunity to mention something else. To my mind, almost all the crystal techniques work. There's a lot of discrepancy between one group saying their techniques are better than another. I feel all techniques work. However, I also feel that certain techniques work better than others because they're either based on scientific or metaphysical principles, which have been tried and true over and over again. And those are the ones that I'm trying to gather together for this encyclopedia. And when I finally put the encyclopedia out in whatever way it appears, I will then open it up to anyone who wants to send us a technique that we can perhaps try and then put in if we get some level of result. But that's what we're trying to do with Crystal Awareness, and particularly with Wtih Enterprises, is get techniques that work.
Does that help you, Ruth?
Yes, could I sneak one other thing in?
Make it quick.
Okay, charging crystals. I've done some very creative things. We had an electrical storm a few weeks ago. You can bet your bottom dollar my crystal was out there in it.
Oh, marvelous.
But what about the changes that crystals do undergo in terms of clearing or losing their cloudiness and things like that? What's going on?
The cloudiness is actually moisture, which is trapped inside the crystal. And as you hold the crystal and work with it, mostly that moisture will go away. You know, you mentioned something else before, though, when you were talking about negativity. We had a man come into our classes in the very beginning, and this man had a small problem. Every time he picked up a clear crystal, he turned it jet black. And I actually had him do it half a dozen times for me because I had trouble believing that that wasn't sleight of hand. But he literally turned the crystal black.
He had a black heart.
A black heart. Well, as we worked with it, it slowed down, and eventually he didn't turn them black anymore. But I've seen that happen, too. There are a lot of things that happen in the crystal world that I understand and can explain. And I think one of the things that keeps my interest in the crystal world is how things will occasionally crop up that I don't understand at all.
Well, why wouldn't a crystal want to stay with a person?
Oh, it may, that could be an individual thing. It could just be that the crystal itself has other plans for itself. It could be that for one reason or another it doesn't feel that it's in tune or in harmony with the person.
I understand. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
All right, Ruth.
Thank you, Ruth.
Good
Bye-bye.
questions. Mm-hmm. She's into her crystals.
She is.
Certainly is. Jim, you're on.
There they are. Thank you. I wanted to ask Ho if he experienced that many people, one person could hold a crystal and it would bring on the effect. Another person would hold the same crystal, bring on a different effect. And maybe one of the people that would change the aura in, and another person that would change it to almost totally different color.
Oh, yeah. Because everyone is a different individual and everybody has different balances within them, different people will get different effects. And that's why, for example, when I was giving out the colors before, I said this is a thumbnail sketch, because there are individual changes and we have to take that into account too.
Yeah.
That's why we always have our students, we say to them, look, this is what we've experienced and found out, but please experiment and let us know what you come up with.
Yeah. Well, it's something I'd like to share with you. I'm a reflexologist. I've had people hold various things, like in one hand, and I'd be working on both feet, or working on an opposite foot, or foot on the opposite hand, and they'd feel a tremendous surge in energy by holding the crystal and switching it. And I've had them hold the crystal, and I'd hold their feet or hands, or work on the feet or hands, and then take their tongue and move from one side of the mouth to the other. And they'd feel a different surge in energy.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard of anything like that?
Not specifically the way you're doing it. I've heard of little things that come close, but not quite the way you're doing it. But I can appreciate that that would happen.
Well, you see, I'm one of the Golden Voyage fans, and I've used Golden Voyage and crystals, work in tapes.
Mm-hmm.
working with people, and I've also done some experiments in the refrigerator, noticing, and I don't have a cluster. Of course, there's a lot of energy in my house, our house. And I've noticed that carrots, after you break the top off of them, will still grow little sprouts in the refrigerator.
That's interesting. We have definitely seen that the crystal water helps plants and things, but you mentioned something else that's interesting, which is crystalline sound. I've attached crystals to all my speaker wires because I have a large sound system and a lot of tapes and records, and we have noticed that certain types of music, especially loud rock music, causes a stress on the body which is weakening. And we've done some tests and found that when you put the crystals on the wire, it doesn't change the sound perhaps noticeably, but the amount of stress on the body is reduced. So we've done that. And I had another experience which I'll share with you because it's a silly one. I went to a concert recently which was a rock group, and I brought my crystals to hold because I knew I was going there and I really wanted to feel all the energies, and they almost had to take me out in a stretcher because my whole body started falling apart. And it wasn't until we got home and we got talking about it that we realized what had happened. I was on the side of the stage, and only the second or third row, where the bass player was, and the bass player in this group plays a bass that is 2 octaves below any other bass that's being used. And it was the amplification of this bass sound rumble, and the crystals I was holding were starting to stress the body tremendously, and bing, bang, bong, everything went.
Well, then, they were magnified in that?
Yeah, they were. So they definitely will magnify. You know, sound has a tremendous effect on the body. It can be tremendously healing. I think a couple of nights ago I was seeing a news report somewhere where they were doing sound massage. They had people lying on the floor and they were playing different instruments and things over them and causing a change in the body with sound.
Dr. Peter Guy Manners has been doing that for a long, long time.
Yeah, I've seen him. Yeah, I've listened to him and talked to him many times. But anyway,
and
I've seen him take tuning forks and do that over the body, and the resonance from the tuning fork would. But I know it'd be interesting to try that with a tuning fork and crystal.
Yeah, see how that would work.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim, does that help you?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for
Bye-bye.
sharing that with us. It's Open Mind. I have Ho with me tonight. We're talking crystals on Talk Radio 79 KABC.